afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 5th of July, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, and we will be joined by live video Skype link by David Ellis and Alex Thompson from the Netherlands. So what can we say? The sun is shining in Plymouth. We finally got back to a bit of sunshine and summer. I'm going to leave it at that.
Can I just say, Theo, last night we had the crane report running in the studio, so the volume is a bit low. Possibly, could you just push up the sliders on the mixer a little bit, please? Go ahead.
So that service, the proper quality of service is maintained. You don't get such service on the BBC with a budget of 3.65 billion.
Yes.
So there we are.
Thank you.
Well, incredible things now starting to unfold in the country. We are going to say UK Column has been predicting a lot of this for some years. We're now well on the way to the calculated breakdown of UK. But let's start off with the hot subject because, of course, tomorrow is the release of the Chilcot inquiry. I had to focus on this article from the Plymouth Herald, and the headline is Royal Navy head told of Iraq invasion by some bastard. I'm going to use the word before Blair told the public. And who is this remarkable man? Well, it's none other than former Admiral Alan West. And he said, I have a horrible feeling that what other people want is to be able to get at people. It should be there to learn real lessons. So let's think this through. This man directly implicated in the events around Iraq. He was the man moving vast assets. So he's worried that the inquiry, what's going on here? People who unlawfully attacked an overseas nation state, murdered hundreds of thousands. He just wants them let off. So I just thought we ought to get into our mind. Here's his comment, former Admiral West, some bastard told me to do it. Apologies for the bad language on the UK Column, but I think we need it. And what happened when the Nazis used that excuse, Mike?
Just following orders?
Just following orders. I'm not sure what German for some bastard told me. Did we let them off? Did we say, well, not to worry because you learnt a few lessons from that. We'll just let you go home. I am absolutely outraged by what's come out of this man's mouth. This is the quality of senior British officers who have allowed Britain's military to be ripped apart. That's treason itself. And now, having been implicated in this, they're squirming and running for cover. David, I'll just ask for your comments on this one. Start.
He's probably not on his own as far as the other senior officers that I've spoke to and over the last couple of years working on this, this very broad issue. Firstly, Alan West's comments really look as if he's approaching this as if it's an air traffic crash and an air traffic investigation. So it isn't. It's nothing like that. It's not about learning the mistakes as to why the cargo door was left open and the planes crashed. It's nothing like that. This affair is a very, very different matter. Now, whilst obviously, yes, he was an officer and he was doing as he was told by the government, but that doesn't absolve him of his responsibilities and whatever part he's played. He's obviously privy to a certain amount of information. So with regard to the, obviously being first sea lord. So as regards to the Chilcot inquiry and to actually the bones of this and why we're seeing so much chaos with Jeremy Corbyn and all the rest of the dynamic down there in Parliament is really, unless the Chilcot report looks at the motives, the specific motives as what was going on and the reasons why military action and regime change took place, then it's a pointless exercise. Because my understanding of what the motive was that Saddam was trading oil in other than American dollars. He was allegedly trading oil in Swiss francs. And that's what's precipitated this problem. So as soon as the currency swaps went through the main central banks, this is what's precipitated the military action. That there was no way that the Western world and Washington was going to have anybody start to do that. So the WMD was clearly, as we all know, there was no WMD because both Britain and America were arming Saddam. We knew exactly what he got and what he hadn't got. It wasn't about nuclear weapons. It was about currency.
Right. So
people have said it's oil, but no, that's not actually it. Oil is nothing on its own. It's the currency that was key.
Right, David, thank you for that. So essentially what you're saying is that British military assets were used in order to fulfill some banking agenda. This is very, very serious stuff. Alex, what's your feeling on this one?
Well, Brian, I was at GCHQ at the time, and we had people running up and down to our desk saying, the political types, right, the ones who didn't have any expertise, saying, guys, it's like really important that we find some link between 9/11 and Iraq, right? Some months before Catherine Gunn, who was in my very section, became the whistleblower and leaked that email to The Independent about spying on the UN in advance of the second resolution. So the first thing we had in the services and in the intelligence agencies was there is a drive to connect Saddam to something we can pin him to. Afterwards came all the intelligence and the dossiers. And I wouldn't be surprised if Chilcot pans the agencies and their heads because it's a safe option tomorrow. After all, prime ministers always choose their safe pair of hands to appoint to inquiry heads, and we see that in Scotland as well with the child sexual abuse inquiry. It bears repeating, I said it before, but Sir John Chilcot was at this very time of the Iraq War none less than the staff counsellor for the agencies, at least for GCHQ, and I believe for the other two as well. So he was the man you went to if you had problems of conscience about what you were being told to do.
I've got to pause for a moment because I didn't know that, Alex. I'm happy to admit that on air. I did not know that, but what an interesting impression that gives of Mr. Sorry, I'll get it right, of the Chilcot inquiry. Well, we can look at that in more detail. Obviously, tomorrow will be a key day for that. So let's follow on. Things getting very serious in Europe. And I just wanted to remind people that this one, France at the moment, and you've pointed this one out, Mike, effectively remains under martial law, so that you've got basic democratic freedoms have been withdrawn, 6,000 to 7,000 French troops on the streets. Why are we interested in this? Well, all of a sudden, because of the incidents which set that up, we've now got the French intelligence services are going to be overhauled, and they're going to bring in something similar to the US National Counterterrorism Center. So we're seeing this rationalizing of intelligence systems across Europe. To me, this makes total sense because, of course, the British government is racing to get full military integration with the European Union. And alongside military integration, you've got to have full streamlining of the intelligence services. So I think I better pass that one back to you, Alex.
Yes, the French have had overhaul after overhaul after overhaul. They had a secret police, the RG, it's called in French, the Renseignements Généraux, and that was basically the agent provocateur, which the French coined the term for and had in droves. And these were abandoned. At the moment, they have the DGSE, which is a combined SIGINT and HUMINT foreign-facing agency, and they have a domestic agency, but they report to different ministers. The idea behind a national terrorism coordinating center, and the US itself didn't have one till halfway through my time at GCHQ, so roughly 2005, if I remember right. The idea is then that you can have people who are just careerists, who are one or two steps removed from the intelligence, who've not served in the armed forces, who don't have a language or a country background, and who are just there to say, I set the threat level at wet finger 3. You see, so they can then ratchet it up to increase people's tensions, push it down, which is very politically dangerous, of course, if they get it wrong, but it's a way of reassuring people if the orders from on high are, don't frighten the horses. It's a long way from intelligence. We have the best model. We've had it since the 1930s, the Joint Intelligence Committee. These are intelligence experts from the armed forces and the agencies and the FCO who have gone up the ranks to the point where they can read intelligence reports and say this one is grade A, this one's grade B, and put it all together. That's the model we are moving away from, because in this postmodern era, it seems people want these civilian national counterterrorism bodies to coordinate and speak among themselves and become an echo chamber, really. They're worthless tools.
Alex, thank you for that. And I know Mike's coming in here with interesting stuff on data protection, but I'll just say a little bit later in the news, we're going to have a brief look at a new government organisation, and just fascinating who's behind it. along the lines of this fact that we are putting people in position of making serious decisions, and they've got no real background or qualifications to do that.
Okay, Baroness Neville Rolfe, DBE CMG. She's the Minister for Data Protection, and she was speaking at the Privacy and Laws Business Annual Conference on data protection yesterday. She was talking about the European angle, for example. She said, until recently, my main focus on matters digital was the impact of the EU data protection regulation. As matters stood and perhaps still stand, it was expected to take effect in the UK by the 25th of May 2018. In line with what I said earlier, we, all of us, I mean you here as well as government, need to consider carefully what might be done, either to replace it if and when it ceases to have effect, or instead, if in the event it never comes into force. She's, of course, talking about Brexit there. And then she said, as I've pointed out, the future might take several different forms, and we need to identify as quickly as possible how best to react to whichever path is eventually chosen. But earlier in her speech, she had said, what I've got up on the screen here at the moment, but data protection can be viewed through a different lens. On this view, data represents people, individuals with personal lives, reputations, and livelihoods increasingly enmeshed with the technology we rely on through the data we share. If organizations misuse or lose this data, they are breaching not only people's rights, they are invading their privacy. They risk damaging people's well-being, not just data sets. So it's perhaps ironic then that today the news is out that the police have committed 2,300 breaches of people's data protection in the last 5 years. So this is police forces across the UK. This is a report from Big Brother Watch, and they have been responsible for at least 2,315 data breaches over the last 5 years. And the report is called Tilted Safe in Police Hands. It's 138 pages long, and it covers what they've garnered from months of freedom of information requests covering police force breaches of the Data Protection Act. And 800 members of staff at police forces accessed information without a policing purpose. It was inappropriately shared with third parties. So Baroness Neville Rolfe demonstrating once again a willingness for utter hypocrisy.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I caught a glimpse of the blue rinse, which I think a few other people have homed in on, and obviously she's more concerned about her appearance than getting the job done.
Yes,
is the best I can say, with some sarcasm.
Yep. Okay, let's move on. It's now 3 days to go until the NATO summit in Warsaw, and today's NATO propaganda is that NATO has 3 core tasks: collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security. So that's nice. But in the meantime, Jens Stoltenberg held a pre-summit press conference yesterday. Here's a little bit of what he said. NATO will further enhance military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. It will see the biggest reinforcement since the Cold War. He said we will deploy 4 robust multinational battalions to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Right on cue then, the House of Commons Defence Committee has released this report, Russia, Implications for UK Defence and Security. This is the first report of session for this year. And they say the fact that NATO and the UK were taken by surprise by the interventions in Ukraine shows a failure to comprehend President Putin's determination to maintain a sphere of influence beyond Russia's own frontier, if necessary by force. And that was according to the committee's chairman, Julian Lewis, who we've got on screen at the moment. According to the report, Russia has become increasingly active, not only in conventional warfare, but in unconventional methods, often deniable, they say, which are designed to fall below the threshold that would trigger the Article 5 NATO guarantee. That's the undertaking to consider an armed attack against one member state as an attack against them all. And they also say that whilst the creation of the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force among NATO member states and the enhanced forward presence on NATO's contested eastern flank are steps in the right direction, that they are warning that the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force has only just been formed, and its capacity to guarantee to deploy the necessary forces within the required time frame is as yet unproven. And they recommend the following. They recommend to recognize the extent of Russia's militarization, remilitarization, and robustly respond to it. They say that they want to review the effectiveness of current deterrence policy against nuclear convention and hybrid or multidimensional warfare. They want to determine whether the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty is in need of repair or replacement, because they allege that Russia has breached its provisions. They say that they want to set out the timetable for the successor to Trident without further delay. They say they want to encourage renewal of EU sanctions against Russia, and they want to consider and consideration of their extension to a wider group amongst the Kremlin leadership. And they say that they want to accept that it is, quote, perfectly possible to confront and constrain an adversary in a region where our interests clash while cooperating with them to some degree in a region where they coincide. So we're going to nuke them where we disagree with them, and we're going to hug them in Syria. This is fantastic, Brian. This is absolutely fantastic.
Well, I think we should ask for a response from our panel,
yes,
as it were.
So perhaps we start with David then.
Well, it's just beggars belief, doesn't it? It's absolutely, we're going full circle over, a 60, 70-year period, and just seeing this complete nonsense coming out of DEFCON continually over and over again. I just look back with absolute sort of horror, because the MPs are not doing their job. They're not certainly, Defence Committee is just a puppet. It's just an absolute joke. It's masking the whole sort of situation. What are we actually dealing with here? We know damn well 18 months ago, Putin gave up with trading oil with the dollar and began to trade oil with the ruble. And that's what all this is about. It's impinging upon the euro. The euro currency has failed. We've got the likes of Mervyn King saying this. All of the old guard, Lord Tebbit, are saying that the euro is an absolute disaster. So we're seeing more or less an attempt at currency reset by using military gearing and the argument to mitigate it with Russia. Now, for the Defence Committee to say that Russia are getting active again, well, that's completely inverted twaddle, because it's the EU that are getting active. This is an utter nonsense for them to perpetrate this kind of propaganda. So, I mean, I just see it that we're going back in time some sort of 60, 70 years. We're almost going back to the sort of period of the Kennedy regime, with Suez and NATO pushing into Turkey. And we've got obviously Turkey coming back up again now, being very, very prominent. And this is just absolutely no way to go on. I'm reassured by this, by the lead American military attaché who was kicked out by Kerry just after the Sochi Games, by saying that this was nonsense. It wasn't going to work. You couldn't have the pushing up to the Russian borders exacerbating this problem and having a lot of military in the same area. It's frankly dangerous. We have lost all of the ability that we had during the Cold War for eye-to-eye, vodka-level discussions with their military, so that we avoided accidents. Now, it just looks to me like they're attempting here to mitigate some sort of, three-quarter global economic reset with the currencies on the back of Russia. And we're just going full circle with Cuba, almost as if the British government has capitulated, as Anthony Eden did with Suez, and the same shenanigans we had there. So, it's just absolutely just useless. And we're seeing some of the characters there on Defence Committee that have played some very interesting hands during this vote leave debate where it comes to military. So, frankly, we're not buying it.
Alex, you got any thoughts?
Behind me is a map of Estonia, one of my favourite countries, as I've mentioned before. And I'll try to do this with a laser pointer. But there is the Russian-Estonian border, and then there's a lake, and then there's the bottom of it. Right, so there's the Russian border. St. Petersburg is not far that way. And all of this is majority ethnic Russian. Right? And the same is true to a lesser extent in Latvia, Lithuania, Georgia, not so much Azerbaijan. This sphere of influence, which our wise policymakers are cursing, is nothing more sinister than wanting to have some say, South Ossetia is a prime example, in areas where the majority of the people are Russian speaking and a very large minority or a small majority are Russian citizens. And they've obtained those passports to avoid being bullied, persecuted, murdered, and having their stuff stolen by the regimes which sprung up since 1991 under Western financial backing. That's what this sphere of influence is all about. If you want to see a real sphere of influence, look at the United States with its Monroe Doctrine, dating back to the 1820s, if I remember right, that no foreign power should have a foothold on the American continent or the Western Hemisphere. Perfectly understandable for a rising great power. We had the same. That's what the sphere of influence stuff is all about. And I'm very glad that David Ellis has raised the currency aspects. Again, when there was the axis of evil, Iran, Iraq, North Korea, there were two other countries that were added to that later, especially Venezuela, in terms of US intelligence priorities in the 2000s, also publicly avowed as such. And cynics, colleagues of mine in the US system, would say, well, this is just the list of people whom W doesn't like or who have offended W. But now I realize it's more than that. It's countries which wanted to trade oil in something other than the dollar. We went bankrupt between the wars. We came off the gold standard then. We did it again in the 70s. The US did as well. There was nothing else backing the dollar by the early 1970s, which is why the Bilderberg meeting in Stockholm in 72 decided to dispatch Kissinger to tell the sheikhs, you will please quadruple the price of your oil because your oil is going to be the sink, the backing for our worthless dollar. Otherwise, we can't carry on like this with our lifestyle and with our military spending in the trillions. That is now running dry, and the euro is turning out to be a dud investment for these guys. So very much so. Venezuela, my point there is, in those years, 2004, 5 or so, started selling in euros. Iran as well. So that's what's at the bottom of it, yes.
Okay, Alex, thank you very much for that. Well, we're building up quite a nice picture here, aren't we, of monetary interests, global monetary interests, using military power, politicized military power, in order to get their own corporate monetary agenda through. Inside government, how do they control the MPs? There is only one subject, that is the abuse of children. And I've got to say, every time I think the BBC has surpassed themselves, there's something else comes out. But this one just absolutely takes the biscuit. We got the BBC reporting that Ms O'Brien, the head of the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry, has resigned. And what did they have to say? Well, basically, they said the chairwoman of the Scottish Government's Child Abuse Inquiry, Susan O'Brien QC, has resigned after facing the sack over unacceptable comments. So according to the BBC, this woman was at fault. She'd done things wrong. She was going to be sacked and made unacceptable comments. So the blame just pushed onto Ms O'Brien. In fact, in her resignation letter, she says a lot. And what she resigned about was the fact that there was constant interference in the child abuse inquiry by the Scottish Government. And so that we know what we're talking about, let's have a look at part of her letter here. And we're just going to highlight in here. This is now coming up on the internet so other people could find it. First of all, she talks about her colleague, Professor Lamb, who also resigned due to interference. In his letter of resignation dated the 27th of June 2016, Professor Lamb complained that the inquiry, as currently set up, is not able to operate in a manner which is properly independent from government. So that's pretty damning stuff. She says, I agree with him. Scottish Government officials have sought to micromanage and control the inquiry, and I have resisted this. And of course, why is the Scottish Government attempting to micromanage and control the abuse inquiry? Because it is the Scottish Government which is at the heart of the cover-up of horrific child abuse, which we've caught glimpses of through the Holly Gregg case. We've now got the Doherty case. There are many others about to break surface, and it is the Scottish Government working hand in glove with Police Scotland and the Scottish judiciary that are covering up the abuse of children. This is the mechanism by which politicians and thus governments are blackmailed. Mike.
Well, lots going on in the children and social work arena. We mentioned this yesterday, the Children and Social Work Bill, which was in the House of Lords, the committee stage yesterday. And we were pointing out, if you remember, that we highlighted some of the text from this to recognize, the that a local authority in England must notify a new the new child safeguarding panel that they're going to create on the death of children, on serious harm to children in various situations, but they weren't actually still getting to the point of tracking children that were going missing in care and trying to work out whether they were ending up in becoming sex slaves or so on. Well, Nikki Morgan has now she's produced a press release really highlighting what she is doing. She's saying this is her vision for children's social care and social work. She's Secretary of State for Education, of course, and she's saying social services are the backstop of our society, offering help, early help to families in need and intervening when things go wrong. Yet thankfully, children's social care is not a service that most children and families ever have to draw on. For most people, the support network provided by family, friends, communities, schools, and health services will be enough to enable them to give their children a safe, stable, and nurturing home. However, there's a smaller group of children, our most vulnerable, who need much more intensive help in order to have the same stable foundations that others take for granted. That's why today I'm proud to be launching my plan for the widest reaching reforms to children's social care and social work in a generation. This strategy will deliver a system staffed and led by the best trained professionals, dynamic and free to innovate in the interests of children with less bureaucracy, new checks and balances designed to hold the system to account in the right ways, and new ways to intervene more quickly where services consistently fail our most vulnerable children. Second, this vision will put innovation at its heart. Our Children and Social Work Bill, which has recently been introduced to Parliament, will create a new power to innovate, Brian, which will be used to give leading local authorities the freedom to test out innovative new ways of working. So children are going to be lab rats. This builds on the £200 million that we're making available to drive innovation and spread excellence in children's services. The very best councils have so much to share, and we must learn from their approach. And she also said that today she was announcing what will pilot a radical new scheme, which is going to be called Staying Close, which allows young people leaving children's homes to live nearby and retain links to those people who have cared for them. Now, bearing in mind the standard of care that many of children have had.
This is to keep them under control, Mike. This is that when they're adults, they're going to be 18-year-olds, they effectively are leaving the care system. They can be tracked, tabs can be kept. So you abuse them in the care system, and then you make sure they never escape, because their loving carers are going to be able to follow them and keep them close. And that, of course, is exactly what's happened in South Wales around the Linda Lewis case, where the daughter was surrounded by social services until well into her adult life, and it's reported in other places.
And of course, this is a function of the in-person scheme in Scotland as well.
Indeed. So the state rapidly coming for children now as part of the close down into the dictatorship. Let's just give the simplest explanation of how this child abuse system works. We're saying it's the fuel of blackmail and control in the British government and the establishment. So we better bring in David Cameron, because he says, well, anybody talking about government cover-up of child abuse is conspiracy theory. Well done, David. Here is a Tory whip, Tim Fortescue. He was a whip for Margaret Thatcher's government. He says on BBC Film that MPs came to the whips with troubles like little boys. We fixed it, so they did as we asked. So what he's saying is that we protected paedophiles and we then blackmailed them in order to carry out government agenda. Here's an article on Margaret Thatcher, because her government was giving donations to the Paedophile Information Exchange. And we better bring in Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt, because they were assisting Paedophile Information Exchange and Paedophile Action for Liberty to do their stuff. And, well, what have we got here? We've got a Goddard inquiry, which says the abuse of children's on an industrial scale, but we don't hear a peep out of that inquiry, not surprising. Kenneth Clarke failed to act over abuse, but of course this man's publicly stated several times there is no child abuse. Of course not, Kenneth. And Michael Gove, well, good man for Prime Minister because he ruled out a public inquiry into abuse. Nothing to see. And then, of course, we'll just bring in one good lady, credit where it's due to Miss O'Brien. She says the Scottish Government has tried to control her inquiry, so she's resigned. So we just remind people on top of that that David Cameron's done such a good job of destroying Britain. Treason is the word, that he's going to move into a mansion in northeast Scotland, which seems to be one of the most vicious areas for child abuse in the country, Mike. But presumably David's completely unaware of that.
Mere coincidence.
Coincidence.
Okay, moving on. Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of England, was talking today. He said that he is easing requirements on banks to hold safety reserves of cash. So he's hoping that this is going to create £150 billion of new lending in the following the Brexit vote. This is to head off issues in the amount of capital that banks have to hold. So he's making banks less safe in the process. That's good stuff. He said that since the December 2015 report, global financial markets have experienced significant volatility. A substantial element of these moves occurred after the referendum, indicating that the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union was seen as affecting the outlook for global economy, particularly in the euro area. So he's blaming it all on the referendum. So when he goes on to say that we have a clear plan, we're rapidly putting its main elements in place and it's working, I believe, this is just my interpretation of what he's saying, I believe that he is saying quite clearly that their plan is to damage the British economy as much as they possibly can in the coming months. They're going to blame it on the referendum result, and they're going to use that in order to not only increase the amount of angst and anger in this country among people, set one person off against the other on the basis of the referendum, but that is going to usher us ever stronger into the European Union again.
I think you're spot on, and we're going to say thank you to Mr. Green who sent in this. So we're following through on Mark Carnage, as you like to call him, Mike. Well, we should relax because the government has magicked up £80 million as a boost for the Life Chances Fund. I'm always reassured when I see the Cabinet Office is going to help our life chances, particularly with the speed at which people are dying within the NHS. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to be having a look at drug and alcohol dependency, children's services, popped in there again, early years, young children, young people, old people services, healthy lives. So relax, because all this is going to be put together by the Cabinet Office with the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University. So I thought I'd have a little peek at them before we came live today, and always have a look at who the people are. And here's the international advisors. And amongst Bill Clinton, we have this gentleman, Mike. I don't know whether you recognise him, but it's a Canadian. And I think this is Mr. Carnage.
Certainly looks like it.
So here's the International Advisory Board that is telling our government how to run the civil service in UK. Members from Chile, the USA. We haven't looked at all of them, but very interesting to see Mr. Carney, Canadian, don't know where his loyalties lie, but these people now working through the back door. And let us not forget this gentleman, Oliver Letwin, former, allegedly, NM Rothschild banker, in control of the UK, in control of the Prime Minister, in control of government, the Cabinet Office, the Conservative Party, the Civil Service, Behavioural Insights, military reserves, Brexit, and now training of the civil service.
And clearly a friend of Hillary Clinton as well, because they both like throwing documents in the bin.
Yeah, classified ones,
yes,
preferably.
Yes.
So, Alex, would you like just a very quick comment on that, and we'll move through because we know we have your section to cover.
My father is always keen on wisecracking with one-liners based on pop songs and so on. And as we moved through that, the awful stuff about child abuse made me think of the Eagles song, The Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never, never leave. And I can imagine that would be the case with people being tagged and being told, you're an adult, dear, but your state is so fragile that you mustn't move within 30-mile radius of here or we'll have to section you again. And then we moved through to blame it on the boogie or blame it on the referendum, I think it would be in this case. Letwin, missing years. Look at Wikipedia. He went to the US, New York. His parents came from Chicago not long before he was born, if I remember right. He is well in with certain Manhattan interests. I don't think we've ever had a documentary produced about this eminence grise, the power behind the throne, and what on earth he was doing there and what his family loyalties are. That's where I think we need to do some digging. Over to the rest of you.
Okay, just 10 seconds, David, because I know that you've had interest on Mr. Letwin from some of the more senior military people, I believe.
Yeah, well, they've finally realised that he who controls Tory party policy, and clearly a whole load of other very key offices in Whitehall, if you control the policy, you control the party. And this is the key to it. It is an absolute, when you overlap all the other facets that you've mentioned there with children and so on and so forth, the control construct is just breathtakingly good. It's very, very efficient. And the one thing that I found with regard to the whole of the Tory party membership, and this must be the same for the Labour Party membership or UKIP, the things seem to be exactly the same, is that 99.99999% of all of those people that are involved that think they're doing something in politics are not. They have absolutely no impact or influence whatsoever. And this is exactly the same with the members of Parliament. They are mute and impotent. They have no effect. They're not doing their job.
This man drives from behind the scenes, and let's have a look at some of the state of some of his high-level colleagues. I couldn't resist this tweet which came out from The Sun. Michael Gove never considered Boris Johnson to be remotely qualified to be Prime Minister. I just had to overlay this with pot kettle. And these men are useless eaters at the heart of the government. I mean, that's all we can say. What nation would want two idiots such as these men governing? But of course, all they do is the bidding of Oliver Letwin.
Now, you and Ian Crane and Mel Kelly were talking about this on the Crane Report last night, and if you're watching this on the UK column live stream, you'll be able to see that Crane Report if you didn't see it last night. But one question that I didn't get to ask, because obviously I was behind the door there, was
behind the door.
Michael Gove has gotten rid of Boris from the leadership contest, and the suggestion was that perhaps he had something over him. Well, that he was chief whip, of course.
That was absolutely true. And chief whip, and therefore it's appropriate that Gove would be saying, no, we don't want any child abuse inquiries, because otherwise the whips lose all their power because all the secrets come out. It's obvious what is driving British government at the moment. It's child abuse and everything around it.
Well, in the meantime, the Labour Party doing a good job of going nuclear. And this is the Labour List blog. Corbynistas and rebels make NEC gains as Skinner steps down. So this is, as they describe it, the battle for places on Labour's ruling body. They're saying that that Skinner has stepped down, and that what they're described as Corbyn skeptic MPs Shabana Mahmood, Margaret Beckett, and George Harth are taking their places on the NEC. Now, Skinner doesn't actually step down until October, so if there's whatever leadership shenanigans go on between now and then, he's at least going to have a part to play on it. But I thought this was interesting as well, because Tom Watson has been meeting with union leaders today and continues to do so, I believe. So, David, if we can come to you first, what do you think that conversation is likely to be about?
Cool. Well, just it's breathtaking what's going on within the Parliamentary Labour Party. I spoke to Dennis Skinner this morning, and got a very good snapshot of what's exactly going on. And he said that the Parliamentary Labour Party was being ripped apart, and it was very much like it was looking similar to when the miners' strike and the coal crisis that we had years ago. That there's something very similar to that when the UDM was formed. And he said that this was looking like exactly what was going to happen within the Parliamentary Labour Party right now.
So, in other words, they're going to split and they're going to create a new party. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what he was saying. But as hard as he tried to get people to stand fast and do their job as an MP representing people, that he was quite. The impression I got from him that he was finding it very difficult to get them to listen to reason. So the rest of his peers there within the Parliamentary Labour Party have quite frankly, if they're acceding to this, they've lost the plot, because to whom does it serve for this to be so? And as it is, I mean, it's more or less like a kind of, I mean, it's exactly like some sort of regime change on full throttle. And it looks to me, and obviously we're seeing a bit of this resurfacing about the miners' strike with Ken Loach alluding to sort of policy and policy control, what exactly was going on there within Margaret Thatcher's government and who had got control of policy. So it was ironic then that we then had a conversation that overlapped with what I've had with Lord Tebbit as to policy control currently under Oliver Letwin and the party. So it was, you know, I think Dennis Skinner's under no illusions as to what's going on there in Parliament, and it's very, very unfortunate that those Labour MPs are not standing fast because they've got to wake up, smell the coffee and see the bigger picture here, because as it stands, they are a completely moribund organisation at the moment, and that's really, really unfortunate for the country. It's not what we need at the moment.
So in the light of that then, Tom Watson, who hates Jeremy Corbyn with a passion, is going off to meet union leaders. What's he going to be saying to them? He's going to be saying to them, basically, you withdraw your support from Jeremy Corbyn now, or we will split the party.
It looks like there's going to be something of that nature. It looks like some sort of showdown, and they've lost the bigger picture, because if they do that, you've then got total chaos if the unions become divided as well. And this tactic of sort of dividing and ruling only suits certain, very few individuals. It certainly doesn't suit the Labour Party as a whole, or the Labour membership, or the people. It's absolutely bonkers what they're doing. But how do we get all those members? It really needs everybody out there to pick up the phone your local Labour MP, and get on to them. You've really got to participate with this, because if you don't, it's going to be absolutely dreadful, whatever the outcome is.
Well, it's going to be a one-party state is where they're rapidly heading, and that will be actually not a party. It will be Oliver Letwin's private fiefdom is what's coming. Yeah. And of course, Ian Crane last night was calling very strongly for people to participate. As you say, it's not enough to sit and observe. People have got to be active, be emailing, writing letters, asking the questions politely but persistently.
Okay, Alex, the book spot, La Décomposition des Nations Européennes. That's appalling pronunciation, but yes. Tell us a little about that.
Pierre Hulin has written 3 of these books, and they're all available, or 2 of them as ebooks if you don't fancy ordering the paper edition from France via Amazon or whatever else. But La Décomposition des Nations Européennes means the breakdown of European nations. And this is really by way of scene setting for our viewers and listeners, because we're shortly going to be introducing to you a German source, a high-level one, who is going to talk to us about, among other things, about FUEN, F-U-E-N, or to give it its German acronym FUEV, which is a regional body of bringing regions together at European level, out with the structures of the EU. And he's written about this at great length. On the front cover here, you see, well, you won't see much of it, but if you order the book or have a look at the stuff online, you will see that every European country except Germany, which gets bigger, every other country gets smaller by being split off. And inside we have things like, in the 1980s, Kohl, before he was Bundeskanzler in West Germany, had set up an Alps to Adriatic region. I've spoken about the German desire for the Adriatic in the past, the Middle Europa project. And we even see that Germany has got regions, sorry about the camera here, all the way around the border of Deutschland. We have regions to expand Deutschland by stealth into this fair country of the Netherlands and all the others as well. I'm not anti-German. I know the Germans very well, and I won't take any accusations that I am any more than accusations that I'm pro-Russian. I'm just talking about political trends that have gone on, and we need to look more closely at how the Nazi continuation project, which by no means is restricted to Germany, has gone out into the EU and other structures with the idea of furthering this idea. I mean, this very map on the cover was produced by a group within the European Parliament called the European Radical Alliance Group. So there are people, even in politics, even elected to the European Parliament, who have this plan in mind. Our source is from the German far left. He doesn't see eye to eye with us about many things, but he will certainly tell you a thing or two about FUN or FUEV. So read up on this already if you can read French.
Okay, and I'll just interject there, Alex, and say, of course, it was FUN that worked furiously to get a foothold in Cornwall and to help push the agenda that Cornwall should be split off from England.
Cornwall marked off as Cerno here as a Celtic nation on that very map. And when I was at Cambridge, I was told that there were possibly 600 people in Cornwall who could string a sentence together in Cornish.
Yes. Well, Alex, let's move on. Mishcon, you had a Twitter exchange with this little organisation. Why are you calling upon people to join the action at mishcon.com? Is this what constitutional lawyers do? And basically, they were inviting people to ask them questions about Article 50. And you were saying, never mind corresponding with Her Majesty's government's lawyers. Tell us about the repeal of the European Communities Act. And they tweeted out again, and you said, too bad Coke, Blackstone and Asquith didn't have a hashtag. Then they would have been constitutional heavyweights like you. So I just thought we'd put this up. This is Mishcon de Rea. They are inviting Article 50 inquiries. What is going on here?
To strip it to essence, Mike, I think that the traitors and the subversives, for that is what they are technically and legally, who are anonymously instructing Mishcon de Rea, I think these guys are not just the European Union and Commission and tentacles of that. I think they're also in our own ranks, and I think that house building and property is in the lead here. We've covered in recent days how slipping under the radar of the Brexit result, the government has tried to accelerate the privatisation of the land registry, and we know about bent lawyers and charges on houses and all that stuff. It's gone back decades. Why is this coming to the fore now? Well, because there's nothing left in our economy but inflated house prices and inflated thieving financial services. And two house building conglomerates have come out or have been outed as paying these two-bit lawyers, Mishcon de Rea, who aren't even London, they're New York, paying them to come up with this argument. And as the Telegraph commentator has said, whom I linked to in my tweet this morning, another one that you didn't show, constitutional and unlawful, which are very technical and proper words in English and common law, these are words which lawyers come out with when they want to sound impressive and pompous. These guys have put out press releases and Twitter hashtags, MPs must decide. They haven't come out with a single argument. And if you look on Twitter, a group called Lawyers for Britain have come out with names and signatures and said, you're talking tosh, give over.
Okay, and in the meantime, the European Commission, it seems, has been, well, you're calling this subversion, but they've been communicating with MPs directly.
Of course it's subversion. These guys are writing from Brussels. We have it on the authority of Mr. Smith, who stripped out the name and the address, but one of our MPs has come out to the public with a screenshot of page 1 of the letter and has said this is being sent to the House, and they've even put House with a lowercase h. That's how much value they set by our Parliament. And they're instructing, in the grammar of a request, that our MPs do not follow the popular will. And they're also instructing them that to leave the EU, one needs to follow the treaty route of Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which didn't even exist till 2009. Now, I was only a boy in the 80s, but I remember constitutionalists telling me even then, when people asked the then quite remote question about the future, how will we ever leave the EEC? The answer was always, Her Majesty's government will have to repeal the European Communities Act 1972. That was a generation before we had a Treaty of Lisbon or an Article 50. So this is really quite a tiz-was and a smokescreen that's being thrown. And it's all of a piece with the whole Remain tantrum that we're seeing around the country. You know, my ideas are so good, my feelings are so hurt, why can't people be one with me? And that's fed through to this press release. There's not a single fact in it. And these people need contempt, and I would invite you to politely join in the scathing contempt of them.
Alex, to your knowledge, is there any reason, any clause within any of the treaties which would prevent us, as a first step, repealing the 1972 Act. Is there any reason why we can't do that until after Article 50? Because as far as I know, there isn't.
The only thing that people might argue is that the Good Friday Agreement, a bilateral treaty with only one foreign government in Dublin, presupposes and is predicated upon the existence of the European Union in Northern Ireland. But that is a matter for bilateral negotiation, and the Taoiseach Enda Kenny, although he's, to use we're not allowed to swear in English on this show, so I'll swear in Irish, he was a gobsha team. Enda Kenny has at least said that he will do his very best to negotiate with the British government, and nobody wants carnage and troubles round two. So that's the only treaty obligation we have, which you could call internal or foreign legal requirements preventing us from repealing the ECA immediately. The rest is just headaches, and they're headaches for Westminster, not for the continent. These so-called 80,000 pieces of legislation and statutory instruments. That's a matter for Parliament, but we have to get it into people's heads. The current crop of party-whipped MPs are not going to do it. And nor is any Prime Minister chosen from their ranks, whether or not he goes to the House, or she, but it's probably going to be May. We're going to have to elect 650 independent MPs, known locally, who've stood on their soapboxes and said, my manifesto is repeal of the ECA. Otherwise, it will never happen.
Yeah. And we need to ban the political parties, and we certainly need to ban the use of whips within the political scene.
Yeah. So, Alex, what's the Dutch Telegraph telling us?
This is the leader of the Dutch Tories, and I'll pick up the pace as we're coming towards the end of the hour now, who is, the party's called the Christian Democratic Appeal, the CDA, and he's popped up out of nowhere in an age when the Dutch have already had no conscription for 15, 20 years. Okay, when you're 18 years old, a Dutch citizen, you get a mail, you get a letter saying you're on the list if we ever need you, but we don't have conscription these days. But he's now saying, much as the Tories did a few years ago, isn't military service good? Won't it put some backbone in people? And the Dutch army is more outspoken than ours and has said, nonsense, we're not kindergarten. We can't be dealing with civilian-minded young people unless they actually want to serve. So the Dutch are smart these days, and they've started asking Mr. Buruma and the others, whose wars are you intending to fight with our young people, pray?
Good question.
And this one?
Yes, this, as it's being presented by the Frankfurter Allgemeine, is really having a go at Germans who've woken up to the fact that the Federal Republic of Germany is a corporation and not a country. Much as we have freemen on the land and sovereign citizens movements in all the English-speaking countries, and whenever anyone says common law, we're accused of being freemen. The same is happening in Germany now. A couple of million people have read books and taken action based on the understanding, which has come out from German government sources now, that when we occupied Germany after the war, we wound it up into something that was not a sovereign country and would not be until 2099. And you can, fair enough, you could have said at the time openly the Germans have committed such hideous things they don't deserve sovereignty for 150 years. But the thing is, it was swept under the carpet. Now it's come out, and a lot of Germans have said, well, the Bundesrepublik Deutschland is only a paper tiger. It doesn't really have citizenship and sovereignty. And some of these guys have started calling themselves Reichsbürger, so citizens of the German Empire or kingdom. It's not as militaristic as it sounds. It's just a way of saying we want a sovereign country back. And when these guys pop up in court, the judges are, of course, very piqued by them, as they are by common law arguments in Britain. But it's just a way of pushing into a corner all these middle-class Germans who are starting to say, no, we don't want the EU, and we don't want the Chancellor, and we want a sovereign country.
And is this why the Bundespräsident is no longer being deferred to as somehow above politics?
Yes, I never thought I would see this in my life. The Bundespräsident, well, first of all, the last one was impeached or had to resign for fear of impeachment because of dodgy dealings. And that was breathtaking enough in propriety-ridden Germany. But now we've got Joachim Gauck, the current Bundespräsident. He's a figurehead, and as in Italy, he's supposed to be an elder statesman who's above politics and represents the nation, dignified and so on. But now he's coming up to Sachsen, the Far East area, where they've already chanted, traitor, traitor, get out of here, to the environment minister who came to give a speech on Labour Day. And the same guys in this very fearless area of Saxony have started shouting, traitor, traitor, to the Bundespräsident now because of the unfettered migration. And Mr. Gauck, I mean, he had credentials, people thought. I mean, he was a persecuted Lutheran pastor, and his father had been born, I think, in a Siberian gulag, and he was an East German himself. But it just shows you, as Solzhenitsyn wrote about this years ago, it's not enough to have the right intellectual pedigree. If you start having mushy ideas when the future of your nation is on the line and saying, well, we have to give way to higher internationalist ideals, then you've lost your credentials. And in some ways, you're a worse traitor than someone who started off as an internationalist and centrist.
But what we're seeing, not in Britain now, in France over the last several months, in Germany it seems as well, we're seeing chaos develop.
Yeah, I mean, the mood has changed here on the continent. I regularly go around all of Benelux, France, Germany. Well, not so much Germany, but no, definitely the mood is not as it was 5, 10 years ago, even 2 years ago. Something is heavy and cloying in the air, and nationalities like the French and Germans who were cynical and passive about their government are starting to become very awoken now, and particularly our referendum result has given a lot of them hope. Which is why, of course, Andrew Marr and other great and good have to write these articles saying it's awful. These right-wing parties in Eastern Europe are really being spurred on by what we've done. Well, good for them.
Okay, well, on that subject, we're going to say thank you very much to an individual who has sent us a whole bunch of cartoons. Unfortunately, they went to our old address, so we've only just picked them up. But this one we found particularly pertinent. We've got the British Bulldog being offered a thin gruel on the way to basically euthanasia within the European Union superstate, and the poor dog is being dragged past the Brexit door, which of course is where he should be going. And on the left-hand side, just to highlight it, we've got the solution. All you need is the truth. And this is such a true statement. We have 17 million people at least. I believe there are many, many more, many millions of more people who just need the truth and the evidence about what the European Union really is. And of course, what our government is doing, who is committing the treason. They need that evidence put on the table in front of them. And we are going to see a remarkable shift to people power, the right sort of people power, to remove these criminal MPs from Westminster. And we do need to remove them in an appropriate, cuddly way, of course, but they have to go. Alex and David, thank you very much for joining us. I think this has been a particularly valuable analysis of what's been happening in UK and Europe. Thank you, and we look forward to having you with us again. To our viewers and listeners, thank you very much for joining us. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing. We can only do it with your help. Alternatively, if you can make a donation, we would appreciate it. Money's not only needed for producing the news, but in order to deal with many of the people who've been hurt and damaged by the system, we need basic funds to cover travel costs if they're to come and report stories to us. We've assisted people with computers, with repairs, all sorts of things in order to help get the truth out. And we need your help to continue doing that. Thanks very much. We'll be back same time tomorrow for Chilcot Day.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.